Thank you. I'll start by acknowledging country. I acknowledge that I'm hosting this panel from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you all work today and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this particular meeting. I pay my respects to elders, past and present and emerging. I'll start off by introducing our two sponsors today. So we are we have two wonderful sponsors who have brought this event to us. The first sponsor is the Department of Industry, Science and Resources, who have come on board to sponsor this particular panel session. We have Bridget, who is the manager of the Science Division and Science Policy and Governance branch, who will be speaking to us for a minute, representing the department today. So over to you, Bridget.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me here today. So my name is Bridget Byrne, and I'm manager of the policy section here in the Commonwealth Department of Industry, Science and Resources. So my team looks after several of the government's diversity in STEM programs, including the Women in STEM Entrepreneurship Grants Program, Women in STEM Ambassador, Elevate Scholarships Program, and the STEM Equity Monitor. These programs aim to increase gender equity in STEM in many ways, such as through co-founding of university scholarships for women, funding projects and organisations which reduce barriers and increase participation in STEM, providing visibility and advocacy on gender issues in STEM, and providing data resources to inform policy. We also look after programs to engage people in STEM and get them excited by science, such as Superstars of STEM and the Girls in STEM Toolkit. These programs provide role models and resources so people can understand what STEM is and learn about the many careers available to them. Last year, the Australian government announced the Pathway to Diversity STEM review, which I'm sure many of you have heard about. This review will determine how government programs can better support diversity in Australia's STEM sectors, and as part of the government's commitment to boost diversity and increase participation of women in STEM. This review included an evaluation of women in STEM programs, such as those I previously mentioned, which found that objectives were clear and consistent, but would benefit from an overarching policy to guide a more holistic suite of programs. While there are positive outcomes from these programs, there are also challenges in fully measuring the impacts and recognition that broader cultural change takes time. The ongoing need for government investment to address diversity in STEM was very clear. The independent review panel, which is chaired by Sally Ann Williams, released draft recommendations in August for public consultation. These draft recommendations recommended actions to improve leadership and governance of diversity in STEM initiatives, recommendations to improve cultural awareness, community attitudes and value of STEM, recommendations to support lifelong learning in STEM, ensuring education settings are safe, supportive and meet diverse needs, as well as recommendations to support STEM workplaces to attract and retain underrepresented employees and grow diversity in leadership. The panel will now review the public's feedback on these draft recommendations and deliver a final report to government. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. We also have one other sponsor for our event, and thank you, ANSTO, for kindly sponsoring this panel session. We have Pamela, who is the Group Executive Nuclear Operations and Nuclear Medicine, who's representing ANSTO today. So over to you, Pamela.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm coming to you from Vienna today, although my usual workplace is Lucas Heights, land of the Dharawal people. So diversity and inclusion is a topic I'm really passionate about, and I champion at ANSTO. It's really important as part of our success strategy. From my perspective, I've seen a lot of what works and what doesn't in diversity and inclusion. And what's really important is strong commitment from leadership, which is essential to be backed up not just by words, but by action as well. Recruitment strategies need to be continuously reviewed and improved. And the work doesn't just stop at attracting people. We need to retain our diverse staff and create an environment that fosters inclusion and belonging. I'd like to share some of our key priority programs that we have at ANSTO for diversity and inclusion. This includes our Reconciliation Action Plan, Women in Leadership, our Ignite Network for young staff members, and our progress towards the SAGE Silver Awards. I am really excited to be online with you today and looking forward to hearing about some of your successful initiatives and ideas before I need to leave to join the general conference. Working together and learning from each other, I'm confident that we can make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela. And beautifully put, it's all about learning from each other, which is what we're hoping today's panel will achieve. I'll start off by maybe introducing the topic. Probably it's not a topic which requires introduction because each of you would not be here as an audience member today if you were not passionate about this particular space. But I came across an example recently which explains the difference between equity and equality. Many of you might have come across this before, not sure why this never came across. I never came across this one, but it was about an athletics track. And the one where you have an athletics track and a group of runners lined up for a race. And if you have them all lined up, starting at exactly the same point, it's perfectly fair because they're all starting at the same point, and that's what you usually represent equality. But then when you usually look at these tracks or the lanes, you see the inside lane is a much shorter distance than the outside lane. And so even though it's an equal starting point, it's not necessarily equitable. So when you readjust for that and you stagger the starting position of the runners to allow for that particular lane position and ensure that each of the runners actually are running the same distance, that represents equity. So I just thought it's a beautiful way to explain the difference between equality and equity, and I'll put that out there. Today's topic is around STEM diversity and inclusion measures that work. We all know about diversity and inclusion. The audience would have read a lot about this. You would have sat across similar panels, hopefully, before. We know enhanced diversity and inclusion brings enhanced productivity. It allows people to stay engaged. You have a better sense of belonging, and everyone then has the opportunity to thrive and to advance in their careers. But then when you have to thrive and advance in your careers, you also have to take into account the differences in life circumstances each of these people might have. Now, running each of these initiatives which kind of push diversity and inclusion forward needs people to be bold, courageous, try something new, stand up against any kind of backlash or challenges, and keep pushing for positive change. Today, we are incredibly lucky. We have a panel of wonderful speakers who have done just that and keep doing that for their organizations. And they all represent sectors in STEM where women are typically underrepresented. And these include industry, academia, as well as a grassroots organization. So I'll start by introducing each of the panelists and asking them one question to kickstart today's panel. So maybe let's start with Rebecca. So Rebecca is actually a managing director in Merck Life Science, and she has over 20 years of experience in the Australian, New Zealand science and chemical industry. So I guess the question for each of the panelists and for you, Rebecca, to start off is, what makes you passionate about change in this particular space? And from implementing your various programs, what is the one main lesson which you have learned?
Thanks, Madhu, and it's really great to be with all of you here today about a topic I'm very passionate about. For me, I think women in STEM and the whole element of diversity and inclusion is really about putting the inclusion part first. Because if we don't create these inclusive environments and being particularly passionate about fostering these inclusive environments, then it doesn't matter all of the programs that we want to put subsequent to that, they don't work. So certainly from my perspective, I think the biggest thing that we can start with is inclusion and being able, as you wonderfully said, the small example about equity versus equality, really understanding that each of us brings something different to the table. I've been in a STEM career for, I've been in STEM for all of my career, now in the life science industry, but I spent most of my career in the chemical industry, which looked very different today and certainly looks very different to the life science industry today. I think the one thing for me as a leader is really to ensure that the learnings that I've taken and the things that I've seen are made easier for the next group of people coming forward. So that's the one thing that I'm really focused on, is how do I make it easier for others coming through. But great to be on the panel today and really excited to hear from the other speakers.
Thanks, Rebecca. It ties in so beautifully with the Pay It Forward, which is the ethos we have for our organization over here. Over to you, Graham. So Graham Beardsell is actually the Executive Vice President of Fujitsu. And Fujitsu especially has actually won a gold award from the Australian Workplace Equality Index most recently because of their commitment to diversity and equity. So Graham, similar question to you. What makes you passionate about this particular space, and what's the one main lesson that you have learned?
Thanks very much, Madhu, and I'm delighted to be here. And like Rebecca, really looking forward to the discussion we're going to have going forward, and welcome any questions at any time. I look after Asia Pacific for Fujitsu, based here in Melbourne, and I'm on Wurundjeri country at the moment. What I've learned previously, and I've been overseas for some 20 years living and working in various parts of Asia, that the unique perspectives that you find in Asia are very important in understanding the communities that you operate in and what you can do as a provider of goods and services to those communities. But the key overriding lesson is you've got to be able to listen. You've got to try and put yourself into other people's shoes and understand their lived experience. I am fortunate enough to be a white Anglo male in a privileged position, which is fairly common in the business community here in Australia and even more broadly in Asia Pacific. So it's important for me to make sure that I understand and respect all the different views and diverse views that people from different cultures and different backgrounds bring to Fujitsu, and make sure that we create an organizational safety for those people to feel that they can be themselves at work and really bring the very best of themselves to an environment where we can harness the best of them to deliver business outcomes to our customers. I also recognize that my experience is very, very different from a lot of the community we're trying to reach out to. I'm very, very passionate about getting more girls and women into STEM, into tech. One of the things I hear often from tech leaders is, well, we can't do anything about gender diversity, quite simply because there's not enough girls who are graduating from university. So we're taking steps to get engaged in secondary schools and even primary schools. We do things like Girls Who Code. We're involved with an organisation called the Australian Business and Community Network that reaches out to high schools to create pathways for girls and boys who otherwise wouldn't think that they had a career in business or in tech. So for me, one of the things that I've learned after some 20 years away from Australia coming back is the power of the network, understanding where you have limitations yourself, either personally or professionally, and reaching out to partners who can give you access to the communities you wish to encourage to participate more. And my job as a leader is to make sure that we welcome folks with different backgrounds and different views and create an environment where they feel really, really comfortable to bring their different views to us. And my last point is there's all sorts of different categories of diversity, but I'm always looking for diversity of thought as well. And that comes from different people and different lived experiences.
Thanks, Graham. We need more champions of change, and not all champions of change need to have the lived experience, but like you said, just need to be able to listen and learn from that. Over to the third panelist we have today, who's Dr. Ruwangi Fernando. So she's actually the founder of STEM Sisters, which is an organization aimed at empowering women of color in STEM. Won a slurry of awards in the last year or two. So thank you, Ruwangi, for being on the panel. And similar question to you. I think for you, I know the answer to this one because it just what makes you passionate about change in this space. And you have run a lot of programs. So what's the main thing which you have learned from them?
Yeah, thank you, Women in Australia, for this opportunity, and for Professor Madhu for having me be part of this panel discussion. My ambition is to, and what I'm really passionate is to make sure that we drive change in the gender equity in STEM, in particular in Australia, and see the challenge of intersectionality of the matter, because there is a lot of effort and programs done throughout maybe generations to bring more women into STEM. But we have seen progress, but we haven't seen the progress that actually we wanted to see. So what is really the gap, and what is this really leaking pipeline? Understanding what's the actual women, particularly in the gender equity spectrum in Australia, and understanding who they are and what are those challenges and what are those intersectional challenges. So I'm particularly, it's lovely. I wanted to see everyone be part of STEM, but in order to drive real change, I really believe on going to the roots and understanding the problem and solving them. So I'm more passionate about, as a woman of color, I'm more passionate about supporting and empowering women of color. So that's where STEM Sisters have been born, and where we are going in this journey, particularly with the STEM Sisters. And then in terms of my learning is this, I have seen tremendous progress since 2017 to 2023. Of course, we have been a very grassroots level organization. Now we are heading more on a national level agenda. But even though throughout this journey, I could see that we were able to, at the same time, to support women, but also see change in the ecosystem. Of course, we need more. There's definitely, we haven't gone to reach the point that we are all happy about, but I've seen progress. So if we invest more and really nail down the problem and provide solutions for them, that is potential for everyone. That's what I've seen in terms of my learnings.
Thank you, Ruwangi. And our final wonderful panelist for today is Professor Kobe Rudd, who's coming in from Edith Cowan University. Now, she's the vice president at Edith Cowan University, but more importantly for us, she leads the Athena Swan initiative, which spans across, academic organizations in Australia. And most recently, they have won not one, but 2 SAGE Signet Awards for their work. So over to you, Kobe. What drives you to work more in this particular space? And given the wonderful success you've had, what's the main takeaway?
Thanks, Madhu. It's great to be part of the discussion today. I guess in answer to the question, what makes me passionate, it goes right back to my childhood. I've never really thought there was anything I couldn't do. And it's not that my parents had any particular sort of moral, guidance in that space, but I don't know. I just never thought there was anything I couldn't do. And so as I grew up, when I started to get told, oh, you can't do that, that question, if not, why not, started to get ingrained very, very early. And like I was an athlete, and I was told to get away from the starting line because this was a serious race. And so that's when I think the fire was lit. Everyone, I went on to win bronze in this kayaking event, and it was not related to skill, let me tell you. It was just sheer rage. I just couldn't believe I'd been told I couldn't even get in the race. So anyway, that started it all. I've had 13 careers, not jobs, actual careers. And in each different career, I've actually risen, very high. And I, again, think it's partly because I've always just said, well, if not, why not? And I've asked the questions. I've never understood why an organisation could think that they could get further ahead by excluding, population groups, or in fact 52% of the population. And so what's happened for me over these careers is I've worked across all sectors. And I guess looking back on my own life, I've realised you've got to start really early. So whilst I work in the higher education sector at the moment, much of my focus is also looking at the youngest age where traditional stereotypes are picked up on, e.g. 3 to 4 years of age, and trying to do work across the lifespan, across sectors, to actually give people you can be what you can see, give them the role models, the aspiration raising. And so look, in higher ed, it's been fabulous, because I guess having had that varied background, I found he was a platform where I could really give something back, and it's paid off. And in 2015, we joined Athena Swan, which is, I hope everybody knows, I'm sure you do, it's an international accreditation scheme for organisations, and it's the only international recognised framework to progress women in STEM of this kind. And so we were one of the first 15 organisations nationally to be awarded the Bronze Award. And then, in fact, last year in August, we were the first organisation in Australia to get the first signet. We have now got 2 signets, as Madhu says, and you know, really what makes me passionate about it, and I guess what have I learned from doing all this, it's that you have to have extremely strong leadership. That leadership has to be pretty resilient, because even a lot of your supporters over time, you know, can sort of dip in and dip out a bit. And having that very senior leadership helps, because in my position, I've been able to put the data and, you know, the measurements and everything in front of the executive and the university senate regularly, and hold people accountable. And so I think what I've learned is never give up, keep going, and use evidence at every turn you can, because I'd like to see somebody prove that organisations aren't more successful if they have, you know, inclusive and diverse boards and, you know, staffing profiles. And by staffing profiles, I mean vertical, not horizontal. People who say to me, oh, you know, don't worry, we've got 50-50. I go, yeah, right. Horizontal, I bet. Take a vertical slice. How many of those women are above that horizontal line? So, yeah, being fearless. That's my advice.
Thanks, Kobe. Wonderful advice. And I think it applies to everything. I'll start off by, you know, going into the panel right now and, you know, talking more about the questions which we received from the wonderful audience. And like many of the panelists have kind of pointed out, we've come a long way in the last decade, at least as far as awareness is concerned. We've discussed this many times. We've talked about the challenges. Some of us have gone into solution mode as well. And as Ruwangi said, since 2017, things have been progressing. And people use the word pipeline, but let's maybe look at it more as a career chart. And we have a long way to go. We have to work right from getting more girls into STEM. And that's one of the topics which, you know, Graham covered off. Working through how girls can actually go through the challenges in the university or educational years. Then they need to kickstart a career. You need to enable them to thrive and not just survive through their career, and then build their way through promotions and leadership positions. So there are so many touch points at which women need to be supported and enabled to, you know, get to where men have already got to for quite a few decades. So maybe let's think a little bit about the programs which each of you are doing. And obviously there are so many touch points, but you can't put all your efforts and all your resources into all of them. So how do you identify what the gap is, which aligns best with your organizational goals, and then initiate that particular program? So that's my next question to you. When you have so many avenues where you can spend your resources and time in, how do you identify what's that one which is aligned closest to you, or where you think you can make most difference? And therefore, what's that one thing where you identified something and then chose to put your time and resources in? Kobe, I'll maybe start with you.
Great, a question I love. So the very first thing that we did, and I think was gold, was we actually listened right at the start back in 2015 when we started Athena Swan. We listened to what the staff had to say. And some of the stuff that we could do was so simple, and it made such a huge difference. And they thought, well, you know, this is the first time we've been heard. I'll give you an example. 50% of the workforce can't come to professional development if it's a 7 a.m. breakfast meeting. So it was so simple. We just said, all right, don't hold anything till, you know, after 10 and make it happen before 2:30. It was simple. Then they'd say things like, oh, well, you know, we can't, you know, come to work, go and pick up the kids if they're sick, bring them back, you know, parking. So we set up a whole lot of designated parking bays for parents. We set up parenting rooms, all sorts of things. And it really wasn't that hard. So basically what we did was we listened to the staff, number one. Secondly, we obviously developed an action plan for that first bronze award. But I think what we did that was quite unique, because I've been asked to talk about it nationally, so that's kind of how I know, is we set up an Athena Swan data dashboard and a second dashboard that was the Athena Swan action plan tracking dashboard. And here's the key, every fortnight, that's a traffic light system. And because I'm a vice president of the university, I'm able to take that every fortnight and table it at the university executive meeting, and look at people who look a bit startled if they've got like the red light against them. And so that kind of very open, we are monitoring, we're watching, and having that very regular kind of robust way of looking at pipeline issues, gaps. Are we achieving? Are we not achieving? What's progressing? Where are there roadblocks? And nobody wants to be identified as a roadblock. And so that's kind of gained a lot of support at the executive level. So that's been helpful. It's flowed through. All the entities within the university also have their own model that's the same now, which is like an Athena Swan executive group at this discipline level or this school level or research level. So that kind of infiltration of the organisation has happened as a result of that just relentless, unwavering, this is what we're doing, this is what we're measuring, how are you going? I think that having obviously some resources allocated, I'm fortunate. I've got a couple of people in my team and a manager that are really fantastic. That's helpful for sure, because they do the heavy lifting. But, that's been critical to actually also determine how much we do. And if we can't do it all, as you say, Madhu, then it doesn't get lost because it's captured in all these data dashboards. And so nothing's ever lost. So no one's ever going to turn around and say, oh, you said you'd do this back in 2018 and we never saw you again. We've got everything there. It's in the parking lot if it's actually not being dealt with right now.
Yep, that's a good idea. Sometimes you just need to keep them until you get the time to do it and get the resources to do it. Absolutely. Rebecca, over to you. How do you identify what aligns? Sometimes it aligns to you, but doesn't align to your organization. But sometimes, everything aligns beautifully. How do you identify what's that one thing you want to put all your time and resources in?
Thanks, Madhu. I think it's got to be about what is aligned to the organizational values that you have as a company. So if I take Merck, for example, we are a 355-year-old science and technology company. So we wouldn't have gotten this far if we didn't have a real commitment to science and to continuing science in decades to come. A lot of what we are about is really sparking curiosity. And so particularly around STEM and being a science and technology company, seeing how we can invest in STEM at the grassroots level to continue to do that going forward. So we as a company have a program called Spark, which is about sparking curiosity, where we take students through some experiments in a laboratory environment or in a school environment. So being able to get out there and work with kids, particularly in those earlier years between those ages of 9 to 13, there's a real desire for kids to really see what they can become. And we get our employees involved. And I think that's another part of really bringing together what's aligned to the values of the organization, but also finding that being able to see that you can find a career in STEM, and that doesn't necessarily need to always wear a lab coat, doesn't necessarily always need to be at the bench, but there are opportunities across the board. In Australia, one of the things that we've done with this concept of sparking curiosity is to really see how we can make it localized. And I think that's the other part of it, working for a global organization, is how do you make it relevant to the place that you're at? And whether that is Australia or in Europe or in the US, it's really about understanding those communities that you work within, and a little bit as Graham mentioned before. So for us, we've embarked on a partnership, and I think that's really, really vital. Again, we can't do everything ourselves, and finding those, again, aligned to our values as an organisation. So we have a partnership with Deadly Science, and we've come up with them, or created with them, these Deadly Labs kits. So Deadly Science is a charity organisation promoting STEM education in Indigenous communities. And we really wanted to create something that was very unique to Australia, but also lived the values that we had as an organisation, sparking curiosity. So together with Deadly Science, we've just launched our first kit. It's about soap making, and part of the experience that we did was listening and really getting out on country and understanding what is it that the elders in the communities are wanting, and it's that connection back to country. So we've just been up to Robinson River, which is a very remote place in the northern part of Australia, and done a soap making or created a soap making kit where we've gone out on country. We've found some leaves to be able to use them as the fragrance within soap making, and then shown how the simple act of washing one's hands with soap can really reduce bacterial counts on surfaces. So the small element that's there is really about finding that that way that it makes a difference, and to really see that there is a real value in bringing that to all peoples. So I think that element of aligning with our goals, but also doing it in a way that represents, diversity, and really building in inclusion in the way that we go about it. That for us is one of the key parts.
That's it, right? I mean, STEM is everywhere, from soap making to, being in labs. So yeah, it's fabulous. Yeah. I love the aspect of where you said you don't need to be wearing a lab coat to be a scientist. You just need to break down that barrier as well. Yeah. Thank you, Rebecca. Over to you, Graham.
Thank you. The benefit of going towards the end is I'll be quick, because some of the ideas that Rebecca and Kobe have teased out are very, very similar. But here at Fujitsu, our global purpose, and we're a global company, 150,000 people in 100 countries, global purpose is to make the world more sustainable by building trust in society through innovation. That's a really broad canvas that I define locally as increasing digital inclusion. So going with the theme today about inclusion and creating, as I said earlier, more pathways to show that people who are otherwise not included in the workforce as we know it have opportunities in STEM. And a couple of things that, when I came to Fujitsu 3 years ago, to pick up on Kobe's point, I felt as a leader, one had to be authentic, and you couldn't just talk about things like inclusion. You couldn't say that you've got a wrap and then file it away for a year and come back to it at the end of the year and see what you can do to maintain that status, or maybe go up a notch. You couldn't talk about technology helping make the world more sustainable without actually doing things. And to Rebecca's point, the best way to do that for us was to engage with communities where they could tell us what they needed to be more included, and what they needed to have access to technology to participate in the digital society that we're all kind of building. It's coming at us 1,000 kilometers an hour. The other thing too, back to the authenticity, when I came back, we were talking about gender equity, because that was something we could easily measure. And we had a gender pay gap. So I did the analysis on that and fixed that in my first 3 months. I felt it'd be disingenuous if we had a gender pay gap and we were trying to attract more women. We had disparities in our leave processes and practices that were not conducive to not just parents looking after kids, but people who are looking after relatives. And often coming from Asia, the care for aged relatives is as impactful on families as the care for kids. So, and typically, disproportionately, that care responsibility rests with women. And we weren't creating an environment where you could spread that load amongst other family members with leave, etc. So we fixed that. They were just a couple of tactics. And then back to the community point that was well made by Rebecca, we felt if we wanted to be serious about creating new opportunities for Aboriginal communities, and don't get me wrong, I mean, having a RAP and building forward is very, very important. But we were looking for ways to make that more impactful to community. So what we did is we reached out through partners, again, back to my point earlier, into Aboriginal community in Queensland, happened to be in Queensland, the Queensland government, through an organisation called Deadly Innovations, and Queensland TAFE were really on the front foot about more engagement with communities. We went to those organisations and found a community in Cherbourg, which is about 250, 300 kilometres out of Brisbane, where we decided, working with the community who are very engaged, to build digital skills around call centre and help desk on country with the community, so that we could create pathways for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who into tech without leaving their community and delivering services to our organisation and to our customers. We developed a course where we donated time and technology, developed a hothouse course of 6 months to basically give these people a quasi degree. And we were fortunate enough to attract 12 people on country to build those skills. It's now up to 20, and over half of them are women. So really empowering the community. And we've been able to use the capability that we built in Cherbourg to deliver service to one of our customers, Australia Post, for example. So there's a commercial element to it as well. And we've created a really new opportunity for a community. We've also been working with another Aboriginal organisation, an entrepreneurial organisation, that's looking at managing kangaroo and other native fauna populations in Australia. And we're using our technology to help with that, artificial intelligence underpinning it, a whole bunch of other things. And I talked also previously about the work we're doing with the Australian Business Community Network in secondary schools. So just various examples there that I think what's important is not just identifying the gap, not just talking about the gap, and senior executives, and I'll talk about myself as the example, are pretty good at talking about what they're going to do, but actually taking some action and bringing that authenticity and then creating the pathways. As Kobe said, though, I think if I could paraphrase, you've got to make sure that you maintain the accountability. You can't just do it once and expect it to happen again. You've just got to really keep your eye on this as a senior executive.
Thanks, Graham. Great examples there, both internally as well as, putting in the resources for external programs. Ruwangi, over to you. I know STEM Sisters has a variety of programs which you run for women of color. How do you pick, which are the ones which require your time and effort at any one particular point?
Yeah, thank you. This one I will take a little bit time just to explain. So as I earlier mentioned, so we are particularly of the intersectionality of the matter, which is for women of color in STEM. So just to give you a little bit of context to this, we even have the statistics around this matter. The glimpse of statistics was in 2020, but we started STEM Sisters in 2017 because we saw the grassroots problem as it is, because the intersectional matter of particularly for women of color was not necessarily addressed. So it was a very grassroots organization. 5 of us got together and actually wanted to talk about it and then find solutions for ourselves. And then the community went on beyond from that point. But again, just to give you a little bit of statistics from the 2020 from the Chief Scientist report, 56% of Australian university qualified STEM women are women who are born overseas, and they face over 4 times unemployment compared to women born in Australia. And this was significantly improved from 2006 to 16. So you can see there were no proper intervention to solve this these challenges, particularly faced by women of color, and therefore the problem has really gone to a next level. So that's what we aim for STEM Sisters. I've shared some resources to get you into the context. But again, when we say women of color in STEM, it's a quite diversity within this group as well. So what we provide, we don't provide STEM skills because our women are equipped with STEM skills. Of course, it would be nice to provide that, but we have a bigger problem with already qualified STEM women in our domain. So therefore, what we provide is like mainly we have identified 4 areas of the leaky pipeline, which I've again shared you some resources. They've come up with in terms of the networking opportunities to find mentors, because from their lived experience, that sort of mentors who have gone through those shoes before, and then in terms of identifying particular opportunities because they are not aware about these opportunities. Likewise, we have identified 4 particular areas of where we see the leaky pipeline, and then we have come up with a range of initiatives to address them, because within our community we are so diverse. Someone will find the inspiration of confidence through a mentoring program. Someone will be for someone it would be our ambassador program. For someone it's one of our in our magazine, a newsletter that they either write or publish or reading that story. And then there is something called the BU program, which is we have an event called Dress to Express. It's about how women of color, because women of color face the challenge of accent looking different compared to the norm, or how do you say that, but whatever we provide based on our community needs. So we identify our community's needs and we continue to do so. So I really welcome.
Ruwangi, you muted yourself by mistake.
I don't have I don't want to take the entire time to explain all of the programs. So I really wish all of you can go and look and understand each and every one of them. Even we have an outreach program called Future Me, which is targeted at cared community for kids. And we use terminology or names and even pictures to address them. So likewise, everything that we do is very targeted and focused. I believe that same has to happen for other intersectionalities in terms of it can be of not just a race aspect. It's very important but it's important to address them separately, because what women of color face is not just a glass ceiling, it's a bamboo or a concrete ceiling. You can't use the same tool to break a glass to break a concrete. And therefore intersectionality, understanding the intersectionality of the matter and addressing them uniquely with those unique challenges is kind of what we have been doing. And therefore we have seen tremendous progress in all of our programs. So I really wish if you can come along and see the journeys. But even though within those programs, like if with the first structured program that we delivered was our mentoring program in 2019, and recently we just finished the 2023 program. This is the 12th week, and every year we have improved it. Now we have, earlier it was just one program. Now we have separated that into 3 different programs: one for current students, one for early career STEM professionals, one for recent graduates. With that, we provide them a curriculum to go over, because we have seen some mentees take it, they really drive the ship and get it to the destination really well. Some would need a little bit of support in terms of understanding what the conversation should be with your mentor, and so that we provide that. So likewise, every year we improve on understanding with our community. So that sort of aspect is very important, so that we drive the change, see the change, we learn from our way how we deliver and improve the things from there.
Thanks, Ruwangi. It's simple things which make a big difference. Like recently I was going through my son's textbooks and I found some Indian names here and there, right? And you just gives you a sense of happiness that you see your community being represented even in textbooks over here. So it's small things which, just make you happy and enhance a sense of belonging. I'll move on to the next question. And this, I guess, is more prevalent for any kind of programs which you're trying to implement within your own organization. Usually the ones which you do outside the organization, like talking to school kids and encouraging more girls into STEM, they don't typically, they don't face these kind of challenges. But when you're trying to make change within an organization and change the way you're trying to do things, you come up with backlash. You have challenges. You have people who don't want to change because that's how it's been done for decades, or someone feels they're being disadvantaged because of the change. How do you overcome that backlash, and how do you overcome that particular challenge? Sometimes, you learn only after doing it that maybe I could have done it differently. So if you were to do the same thing all over again, would you change the way you do it just so that it makes it easier to overcome that backlash or the challenges? I'll maybe start with you, Graham.
Thanks very much. Yeah, look, someone quoted to me recently, we're in a state of almost constant organizational change, moving from a traditional IT company to a nimble digital transformation company. And change is one of the most difficult things for humans to accept and deal with in a very managed way. So you've got to understand that. But you're absolutely right, Madhu, there are challenges and there is resistance. There's resistance that you can see and there's resistance that you can't see as well. You have to take account of that. You have to understand, again, back to what I said before, not just lived experience, but how people from different cultures and different backgrounds deal with change and deal with uncertainty. We have set some really big goals. We've said that we want to be truly representative of the communities we serve by 2026. So we've got the usual business goals around revenue and profit, but social goals. And what that means, if you strip it back, is gender balance by 2026. We're currently at about 26%. That means differently abled people who represent somewhere around 18 to 20% of the community. We're at less than 1% representation here. So some big goals that we're pushing towards. Again, back to a common theme through my last two answers, one of partnership. So we're working with peak organizations, and I've built relationships with people who are leaders in different communities that are underserved, so I can understand what we can do as an organization to create opportunities for them. We also feel that it's not just the leadership team. It gets down to the hiring managers, and it gets down to the informal leaders of teams as well, the influencers in the organization. It's all well and good for us to set out certain standards, and we've done all of this too. We've changed all of the terminology we use in job descriptions, for example. We've gone gender neutral. We've made sure that when we're looking at different cultures around Asia Pacific, we are very cognizant of the way we communicate with folks. We're doing everything we can to get to a more even-handed, inclusive environment in which people feel, okay, this company's serious. They're demonstrating with words, and words are important, we know, demonstrating that you can have access. Getting access is great, and getting to a point where we're reaching more diverse communities, but then what's their experience when they come into the company? And that is typically not defined by me, because unless someone's reporting directly to me, my level of influence on those people is limited. So we've done a lot of work in working with external bodies. Our recruiter has a cultural awareness program. We put all our managers through that. We continually educate people when they are, for the very first time, bringing on employees who have different needs or different cultural touch points to the general population. So it's a constant matter of educating and also communicating with those folks about what their work experience is like. Far be it from me, again, a white Anglo-Saxon man in a privileged position, to decide what is the right way to create a workspace for people with different abilities, or people with different sexual orientation or cultural orientation. So we're constantly engaging with the communities. Myself as well, we have advisory boards, employee advisory boards that report to me once a quarter, and we look to them to define policy that maintains not only inclusion, but ongoing inclusion, or access, but ongoing inclusion. So it's just a constant effort to build that cultural change into an organization. We are seeing some good signs. I just want us to go a bit faster.
Yep, sounds right. Kobe, I guess a similar question to you, which is around I guess in some ways it's, I wouldn't say easier, but you know, in many ways, I'm speaking to at least 3 of you who are senior leaders in the organization. But then you're also trying to implement huge programs sometimes. And like Graham's pointed out at the end, we're trying to get there faster, not at the slow pace at which we've been getting there until now. And obviously that attracts a lot of, you know, resistance sometimes. So Kobe, any particular tips from you in terms of, you know, overcoming resistance and backlash?
Yeah, definitely. So, sorry, I just got a funny throat. You know, my first tip is be alert. Be alert. You know, there's so many unconscious biases, and you know, we know that they are mental shortcuts, and they make people's lives easier. So the moment decision making is easy, you have a problem, because you're clearly not surrounding yourself with people that are challenging things. So therefore, watch out for that. And you know, we've done lots of stuff like, you know, you can't serve on a selection panel if you haven't done bias busting training. And, you know, we've got the bias, gender bias busting checklist, and people have this on their wall. And it's like Graham was saying, it's about check your language, check your images when you're recruiting, particularly make sure you're not image-wise and language-wise shutting out some of the market. But, you know, I want to talk about something that is really an important part of the answer to your question, Madhu, because it's not just about me. I mean, if I fall off my perch, if we had centered everything around having a strong leader, we'd be in trouble. So I've actually done very much growing the movement with me. I'm not here solo. I've got this massive, for want of a better word, army behind me. And if I fall off my perch, it shouldn't make any difference at all. So I call stuff, and I've taught people what I'm doing and how I'm doing it, so that they too can do it. So I'll give you an example. Like, you know, I used to go to loads and loads of meetings, and I'd go, and I'd look around the room and I'd just get ignored. And I'm thinking, what's wrong with me? Do I need to go to voice projection classes or something? And, you know, typical thing that we do, you know, oh, it's me, it's my fault, you know, the imposter syndrome, I shouldn't probably be here anyway. Anyway, I worked out it wasn't that. And so I've got this strategy where whenever I'm in a meeting and someone, particular woman or someone from a gender diverse group says something, I immediately go, excuse me, Chair, that's a really great point that Annette's made. Can we capture it in the minutes? So now, of course, everyone knows I'm doing it and everybody else is doing it too. So the silent voices, so to speak, can't get overlooked anymore. But I've also sort of sat there with my little, you know, scientist behaviour recording stuff. How many times women, for instance, would start their sentence at a meeting or when they're going to present some really important research. Oh, excuse me, I'm no expert, but can I just say something? So anyway, I go, you know, tick. So of course now, if anyone sees me doing the, you know, at a meeting, they know exactly what I'm doing and they're on to me. But that's good, because now they all realise what it is that I'm picking up. And it took me a long time to learn how to call it out and do it in a respectful way that didn't get me punched in the face, basically. Because, you know, there's been times when I've been at a gender equality conference, let's say as the keynote speaker, and, you know, it's been a gender equality conference and it's been male who stood up as the conference organiser, male who stood up as the host, and, you know, that's the sort of stuff that if you don't change what you can see, if you don't change the environment, and attitudes and behaviours following that, you know, you're not going to change anything. We had a photo, once we got bronze, the Themis won bronze, we had a photo, and I was standing there with the people from, you know, SAGE that were awarding it. And I just sort of realised you know, I suddenly looked behind me and here's this wall of scientists at the university I work, all male. So here we were posing for a photo, getting a gender equality award, standing in front of the wall of men. And so, you know, it's really not about fixing the women for me. It's about fixing the environments, fixing the attitudes and behaviours, but in a way that we sort of redress this thing that, you know, women just have to keep jumping higher and higher and higher. No, you know, calling it, stopping stuff when you see that. And, you know, doing things like Graham's talked about, you know, we've got an Athena Swan advancement scheme where women or gender diverse people can apply, and it started off with quite a lot of money, $15,000, but they don't have to do anything. You know, there's no great reporting or, you know, presenting your findings, what you did. No, here's the money. Take your mother to the conference so she can look after your kids if that's what you need, but we don't need you to report. There's no auditing, you know, you got the money, off you go. And that's been really significant. That's made a lot of change as well. So look, I could go on. There's kind of a lot of examples, but I think it's probably more important to give those higher level learnings than anything.
The great examples, Kobe. I love the amplifying the voice of the person in the meeting, just making sure the voices are heard. And the other one, which was around, you know, the way we typically start talking, apologizing for ourselves and for the space and the time which we are taking. I used to say a lot of times at meetings, I was lucky, and then somebody told me off and they said, you were not lucky all the time.
And can I just say one thing? I used to always put little smiley faces in my emails and, oh, hey, you know, would you mind doing this bit of work in a smiley? And there's really good research around how women do that, so that it's the double bind. So they're not seen as being, you know, bossy and aggressive and And I've talked a lot about that, and I now stop putting a smiley face or exclamation marks in my emails, because it's the research is really good around that. It's about somehow or other softening the message, making it more user-friendly.
Yep. Thanks, Kobe. Rebecca and Ruwangi, I'll maybe change the question for you, because it was around more of, you know, it's a bit of what Kobe said in some ways, which is, it's not you leading this entire thing or bearing the whole thing on your own shoulders, but it's more of, you know, changing that culture from being passive D&I and being push D&I all the time to it becoming an active culture. Rebecca, maybe, are we there yet? Or, you know, what would it take to go from being passive D&I to it becoming an active culture?
I think that we're having sessions today talking about diversity and inclusion means we're not there yet, and I wonder whether it's also a journey that we all need to continue to move on together. I think Kobe made some really good points around that. How do you engage others? Because it's not just the importance of it. Certainly, it's very important to make sure that there's a strong ambition, there's strong frameworks. But it doesn't just start and stop with the leader or the leadership team. There's a really great video on YouTube about how to create a movement. And the video talks about, it's basically at a concert, and one guy gets up and starts to dance. And it's not that guy who's the most impactful person. It's the second person. It's the second one who jumps up and starts making it okay. And I think that's what really is about, is that how do you create those champions within the organization at various levels of the organization? And Graham mentioned it as well. It's not just about what we do, but how do you find those people who are really similarly passionate, who've got great stories to tell, and empower them and give them a really strong voice. I think we'll always see the naysayers, and that's okay. You know, I think there's the elements of, you know, that especially in technology, Graham, you know, the early adopters who jump in first, and then there's the laggards, and that's natural, that's normal, that's human behavior. We all are made differently, but I think it's the understanding that we need to have. So I think it's finding those people within your organization as influencers, setting out on a strong path where you're really making those clear commitments. And it is I think, as the speakers have said before, doing it authentically. So not just ticking a box saying, hey, we've got a really nice plan, it's up on the wall, and we look at it, but we truly measure it, we truly embrace it all the time, and it means something to us. And I think then adjusting along the way. I think as times change, as things change through our communities as well and through society, we've got to be adaptable and being able to address and having really strong and good conversations about the things that are there and taking a perspective of education. For me, I think they're the key things that we can do to make it something that is everlasting.
Perfect. Love the dancing analogy, Rebecca. I think that's perfect. Ruwangi, maybe a question for you, which is around, yours is a grassroots organization, as you indicated. Did you have to convince people that this is a cause worth supporting? Because a lot of the efforts sometimes are bottom up. Not all efforts are top down when it comes to D&I measures. Sometimes we have to convince people that this is worth doing and talk to people at different levels to actually convince them to put their time, money, or resources into making that change. So could you maybe give us an example of where you had to convince people? Because a lot of people in the audience want to know how can they actually go have that conversation and help people see things from their perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Madhu. Yes, of course. Getting the community on board was not hard at all because they know the problem. So they once this was a place to they call their community to belong, it was very easy and it spread around very quickly. But in terms of getting the rest, like decision makers, government, the STEM industry, that was a challenge. But I think the way I went about it is finding great allies. So even for STEM Sisters, we have an advisory panel, and even Professor Madhu is one of the advisory panel members. And because we were more prominent in Victoria, we have Dr. Amanda Caples, who is the chief scientist in Victoria, part of the advisory panel, who is heading the advisory. So likewise, finding allies and then educating. I've come across sometimes people who had no idea about intersectionality, but it was a kind introduction. And also, especially for the STEM industry, how I went about is talking about the profits that they can really gain, because D&I is not just about a good thing to do, it's the most profitable thing to do, right? So therefore, just showcasing that as an organization, if you really wanted to be, you have to gain your competitive advantage aside your any other competitor, D&I is the focus, and especially in technology more than anywhere else. So these pointers is how we drive conversation. Through that driving the conversation, then you can say, okay, if you wanted to hire women in STEM, then you have to understand who are the demographic of women in STEM, and then understand those challenges and address those challenges. So it's a continuous, in terms of education, it's a continuous education that is required. You need to engage. You have to use data-driven top of results and take studies. There are a lot of there may be less in Australian about intersectionality studies, but there are quite a lot in UK and US. So bringing those in and showcasing this has been work, and this is where you can really drive innovative changes in your organization. So it's I have seen progress, as I said, compared to 2017 to 2023, but there is more to be done. And I just wanted to also highlight at this opportunity, it's nice that even from my end, we have worked towards the next step of STEM Sisters, not just STEM Sisters, for all women in STEM. We have a particular platform called DARE, which I'll share. So which is to where we remove the recruitment bias for women in STEM. So it's like an organization, you have to think about the next steps, because advocacy is very important, but we need to get these women into STEM roles. So there is currently only 15% who are qualified in STEM, who are women, are working in STEM. So what about the remaining 85? Are there unemployment, or where they are working in other sectors of STEM? So we have a bigger problem in the STEM ecosystem in Australia. It's not just that women are not, you can't find women with STEM skills, right? There are so much women in STEM skills, but they are not in workplaces. So we really need to address this challenge. It's a very complex situation, but just to avoid at least the recruitment bias, it's one of the steps that we have taken moving forward. So in that way, we remove any of the bias elements, their age, their country of birth, and they're coming back into workforce. they should be only assessed for their skills and for their experience. That should only matter. And if employers are keen and understanding, and especially with a driven, 90% of like all of the workforce that we need by 2025, 90% will require STEM skills. So this is not a niche market anymore at all. Right? So 25 is just like 1 year and few months ahead, right? So we have a great challenge in all of us, right, to face, and we have to really tactfully change it. But I think in terms of identifying the problem, the ecosystem understands the problem now, which is a great thing. Now we all need to work towards really making impactful solutions to these problems. I think that's where we are at.
Thanks, Ruwangi. I'll move the dialogue more towards measurement now. So, in the recent years, there's been a big focus on, we all do diversity and equity programs, but do we actually measure on what works and what doesn't work? There's a lot of money, there's a lot of time being spent, especially Graham, I'll maybe loop to you first, because a lot of focus and time has been spent for decades, in trying to get more girls into STEM or attract more girls coming into STEM programs. But how do you measure the effectiveness of some of these things which we do? And again, like they always say, diversity is an easy thing sometimes to measure. Inclusion is not so much easy to measure. It's more qualitative rather than quantitative sometimes. But how do you measure if something is working or not working? And how do you then also, more importantly, how do you decide what's the time frame for measurement? Because some things have an effect in a year or two, whereas some things take a decade to see a change. So maybe Graham, I'll put this question to you. Do you measure the effectiveness of these programs, and if so, how do you do it, and what's the time frame of measurement?
We do measure the effectiveness of the programs, and we do them over a long period. Wouldn't go so far as to say it's a longitudinal study. We've only been doing it for a couple of years, but one of the things I instituted when I first arrived 3 years ago is to pull together diversity and inclusion, community engagement, connection with Indigenous communities, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders here, Māori and Pacifica in New Zealand, and also the environment, and put it into a group called Purpose. And we found ourselves a terrific leader of that group, a team of one, and she's built a bigger team, still half a dozen people. We've now embedded Purpose into people and culture. And in the evolution of that position, what the original incumbent, who's now the head of our Purpose People and Culture, Nicole Forrester, and I agreed, is that we would measure things. We would push the envelope a bit. We don't be afraid to ask questions, do them respectfully, be prepared for people to say no when they're identifying different areas of their history and their background, particularly if there's intersectionality involved. Ruwangi talked a lot about that, and I was nodding my head a lot. It's very important not to just focus on one part of someone's lived experience or cultural background, but often there is intersectionality, and you have to understand all elements of that. But we are fairly, as a corporate enterprise that's data driven and sells data capabilities, we really do look to collect as much data as we can, ask as many questions as we can, respectfully respond to what our staff tell us, and then repeat that back, not just to our leadership team, but the next level of leaders and the next level of leaders who really are, back to a point I made earlier, the people who will make the change. One thing I was just typing in the chat there that I'll now say, again, picking up on what was said previously by all of the other speakers. One of the things that Nicole said to me early on was, if you can't see it, you can't be it. So we have a responsibility to show where there's been success of people who've broken through barriers, or who are the first group who we've been able to attract to Fujitsu. Now, what's important is maintaining that and not just patting yourself on the back for a Pyrrhic victory, breaking through with a new cultural group or a new gender group and then having them leave, but tell stories about their experience and share those stories in the organization. We, as a commercial enterprise, are very good at talking about stories of business success. But what we've done, and I was encouraged by one of my board members to do this, is make our stories of success about where people have brought change in the organisation, and that can be cultural, gender, or different ability-based change. And that's been really terrific for encouraging others to have a go and to see that we truly are respectful of different participation.
Thanks, Graham. Kobe, I'll maybe loop a similar question to you, because you mentioned very early on, you started off by having a chart or a graph which you're tracking on a fortnightly basis and seeing how you're doing. Is there a way by which you could measure inclusion? So like I said, diversity kind of comes up in numbers, but is there a way to measure how people are feeling, their sense of belonging? And is that something which you do as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, going for signets, on the way to getting silver, it's Athena Swan accreditation. It's actually about impact, and impact is what you're getting at here. So like when, we can measure process outputs and outcomes, like, we've got all these parenting return to work resources, or, we've implemented assessing achievement relative to opportunity in all our promotions or recruitment things. We even, might look for potential. That's all very good. We might do all this stuff I'm talking about, but at the end of the day, it's not about the outputs or the outcomes. It's actually about the impact. So taking it as far down the line as you can, and every step along the way going, so what, so what, so what? Because what you're really looking for is not just, we got all these extra women, appointed into roles in STEM. Even if you got to the point where you could say, we had an X% increase of women in STEM getting into senior positions, again, I'd even say, so what? Because unless they feel that they can really influence decision-making, they could be in a senior position, but they could still be facing obstacles and roadblocks. So every step of the way, for me, it's about taking it as far as you can along the impact kind of trajectory. And so, look, harping back to what I said earlier, we have got very robust sort of systems for measurement, and we can demonstrate the increases in women getting into all the different levels in the university, and we can sort of address the scissors graph of, are we getting more, females and gender diverse people, if they identify as so, enrolling in courses. And even if we get to the point where they graduate, to me, that's not enough, because, we all have horror stories. Madhu, I'm sure you can probably relate to some of them where, women have graduated from engineering and then they go into a workforce and they wonder why they even did the degree almost. So impact's really, really important for me.
Good one. Rebecca, I'll maybe ask you a different question, keeping in mind the time, and I do want to open this out for at least 10 minutes to the audience for them to ask questions. One of the common themes which has emerged even from today's topic is, while we started talking about gender diversity, there's, like Ruwangi very nicely pointed out, this bamboo seedings, concrete seedings, sticky floors. There are other aspects of intersectionality which need to be considered as well, especially during recruitment and during promotion. There are other things like ageism, and there are, this gendered ageism, which is affecting a lot of women. There's other aspects around, neurodiversity, which is an upcoming topic of discussion. There's obviously the migrants and people who have come from different countries, as Ruwangi is focusing on. Are there other aspects beyond gender which your organization might be looking into as well, especially from a recruitment and a promotion perspective? And how do you account for that intersectionality?
Yeah, I think it is about setting the right ambitions. As a global organization, we've set a target to be gender neutral by 2030, but we've also set a target around minority races. And this changes depending on where we are located, in Europe or the US or in Asia. So it is about setting some ambitions and having some targets to get there. But then I think, as the other speakers have talked about, it's then measuring that impact, and that impact doesn't necessarily need to be in a percentage number of people. It's that sense of belonging that I think becomes really important. And as an organisation, we measure engagement, and so it's an annual survey that's run. And I think being able to pull in those elements into that sense of belonging, do people really come to work because they're passionate about what they do, and are they enabled to come and be themselves? And I think seeing that level of how engaged are people, and how much do they see this sense of belonging that's there. So it comes in both forms. I think it's setting ambitions that are really trying to push the limits, but also then I think, as Graham mentioned as well, is telling those success stories. We as a company here in Australia have a very different perspective. We're 67% women, and that's across our life science and healthcare business. I think for us it's been the frameworks, but also continuing to, as many of the other speakers have said, to listen. And we, I've been with Merck now 3 years, and I'm really impressed by the way that we truly live our employee engagement survey. It's not something that's done once a year, put in a cupboard, and that's it. It's something that is talked about, is that the leadership team are actively working on it. Leaders and then managers throughout the organization are working on it. And then that comes down to that authenticity. So it's not just a tick the box exercise, we do it once, but we truly want to listen. We want to continue to. I think things that we've implemented, again, really simple things, skip level meetings. So I host a coffee. I'm a coffee addict, but I host a coffee with Rebecca where I just get into a couple of people, so not a big group, 3 or 4 people come together. Tell me what's on your mind. If you were in my, I'll ask the question, if you were in my shoes, what would be the thing that would make you, or if you had that opportunity today, what would it be? And just being able to sit down and listen. I think it's the way that we can really connect. And again, the people that will see what I do from standing up there as a leader, but also then being that authentic person coming in and chatting to them on a really one-on-one level. So I think these are simple things that are very easy to do throughout an organization that continue to live this engagement, because if it's a one-time event, then you're not really going to get much out of it.
You answered my final question in a way, which is my question to wrap up this before I open it up to the audience, which was a low-hanging fruit. So tomorrow, if there's something which we can do to enhance inclusion, it costs nothing, but we can go into a workplace and do this from tomorrow just to enhance and uplift inclusion. What would that one thing be? So a very quick tip, final tip from each of you. And Rebecca, since you already almost got there, I'll start with you.
Well, it might not be no cost because I fund the coffee, but no, very much. I think it is getting out and talking to people. At the end of the day, one thing that we've realized in the last couple of years after everything we've been through with the COVID pandemic is that element of personal connection. And I think the ability to just get in front of people and have a really good discussion about what's on their minds, that's something that's very easy to do. Being able to properly listen, and I'm not just talking about listening but really listening to understand, and even that next level of listening, which is called generative listening, really listening to, again, I think, Graham, you mentioned it earlier, put yourself in others' shoes. Being able to walk in others' shoes is the bit that really helps us from that bias perspective, because it's really hard to check intent. So that would be my recommendation. Get out and talk to people.
Absolutely. Graham, over to you. One hot tip.
Pretty much the same thing. I just take what Rebecca said, which is great advice. It's something we can all do tomorrow, but go a step further. Don't necessarily look inside the organization, but think about a group that you want to target, a group that is underrepresented in your organization, or a group that you identify with, particularly if you identify with issues of intersectionality where there are various different things where you feel that you're not included. Reach out to said group. I've found, since I've been back in Australia, I've reached out to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander groups, differently abled groups, and they're more than willing to talk and help educate you about how to create a more inclusive and diverse workplace. So again, same theme, but just with a different spin. Thanks.
Thanks, Graham. Ruwangi?
Yeah. on this note, I think I think we all be human and just see that everyone else is a human and take off layers of see. And then if you can be that, I think, we will all work towards a better future. So that's my message. So be human. Yeah.
Thanks, Ruwangi. And Kobe, you've had lots of thinking time. So one tip.
High visibility. I don't mean wear a vest, but well, you can if you want. But I mean things like make sure that you profile people from all different kind of sections, so to speak. So you've got intersectionality. We've got this thing called Our Stories, where we profile someone, deliberately profile the people who feel invisible, under-recognized, and so like skew everything towards doing very visible profiling of those people. And then the other visible stuff is behaviors. Leave loudly early. Make sure everybody knows you're going to pick up the kids. So that kind of high visibility for me has been probably really life-changing for many people.
Fabulous tip. Thanks, Kobe. I'm now going to open it out to questions for the next 8 minutes or so. If you do have a question, you could raise your hand and then we'd be able to unmute you for you to ask your question. The other side is obviously you could type it in the chat and then I could read out the question as well. So we probably have time for 2 questions, depending on how long they are and how long they take to answer. Anybody wants to ask any questions?
Hi, Madhu. I think Jane has a question in the chat.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I guess the question was to Kobe, as non-higher ed organisations that aren't part of the Sage Athena Swan network, and therefore there are lots of really great resources that are being developed there that sort of intersects with non-higher ed employers. So where women in STEM may be working as engineers in our utilities, in our case, or in other organisations. I'd had a look and sort of seen some great resources from Sage Athena Swan, but you have to be part of a higher ed institution to sort of access some of that. Is there, obviously you don't need to make everything available to everybody, but are there things that organisations that may not have the resourcing or the that might be looking at the type of tools that are being developed for women in STEM with technical qualifications that we could possibly access or to be shared that could be broader? I think that could be applied.
Yeah, look, absolutely. For instance, all of our resources are free of charge and available. So we're happy to share our resources with anyone. So you can get in touch either with me or with Athena Swan at ECU. But also there's other things that are related. I noticed in the chat you've mentioned the walking in my shoes. There's other resources that have been developed over the years through the Australian government. Like, for instance, I was funded to do this suite of resources that were walking in the shoes of Aboriginal people, and I had Aboriginal governance for that. So there's resources like that that are actually online learning resources, walking in the shoes of people who feel that they are in a marginalised group. So I suggest, even though this sounds a little bit convoluted, if you can identify an organisation that's doing stuff that's kind of what you're after, I just get in touch with them and ask them. Alternatively, go to Sage and say, look, I want to get those resources from those organisations, or I want everything that everyone's done in Sage institutions in relative opportunity. So, I think there would be ways of getting it easily. We would be happy to share our stuff with anyone that wants it, really.
Thank you. That's brilliant.
Thanks, Kobe, and thanks, Jane. Rachel, you have a question?
I've just typed it in actually, Madhu, but I'll speak it as well. I'm sorry, I can't turn my video on for some reason. I'm just interested in what, and can I just say it's a really inspiring panel. I've really enjoyed it. It's so great to sort of feel the change. I'm just wondering what your organisations are doing about gendered ageism, and this has been called the last acceptable form of discrimination, this double jeopardy of being older and female. And we know that there's just very few women over 55 left in the STEM workforce. And I don't mean just in leadership, I mean, you know, technical experts, whatever, they're sort of pretty thin on the ground. And this is, you know, obviously devastating for the individual women who often have suffered a big gender pay gap. Sorry, somebody's asking me, there's my video. Sorry, I couldn't start it before. But it's also really bad for STEM, where we know, you know, we all accept that diversity and inclusion is important. And my personal experience is I believe it's really not good for younger women, because I have found, and I'm 63, I have found that younger women particularly appreciate having older women in the workforce. So I'm just really interested in how you're tackling it, and what your feelings are about this sort of sometimes, you know, a bit of a blind spot for our D&I activities.
Thanks, Rachel. Is there any particular panelist who would like to answer this question?
If I give, in terms of the DARE platform, we have eliminated the age aspect so that you will be only assessed based on your experience. This is only for the recruitment side. But in terms of an organization, I strongly agree with you. To have more women, we need you know, women who have gone through, so that it's easy pipeline to pull everyone. So I think as an organization, all intersectional sections, and especially for women, ageism is a problem to be tackled. But in terms of recruitment side, we have come up in our inclusive solution, we have made sure that we avoid the age aspect, so that it's not something that employers would see until, like, you know, obviously, you know, by face judgment or something, they may be able to see it towards a you know, interview process, but at least till then we'll be able to hide it. Yes.
Thanks, Rwanda.
Thank you.
Just to add to that, we've done something similar. The other thing is where I can influence things, I am doing so to show that experience is valued. I put together an advisory board which is cisgender balanced, and a couple of the members are very, very experienced women, 30 plus years of experience in the corporate sector. And on my direct leadership team, there's a couple of women. There's not enough women on the leadership team. We're at about 30-odd%, but a couple of the women are very experienced as well, 30 plus years experience. And these are people who continue to show leadership in the organisation and outside the organisation.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it is, Rachel, to your question, is really around those hiring practices. And I think putting in place those gender balanced panels, but also having it reflective of the organisation, a little bit around, I think, again, measurement. So really seeing throughout the organisation what are the opportunities that are there as well, and how you're promoting people through, and providing opportunities inside the organisation for different roles. And particularly, I think one thing that's often undervalued is those sideways movements. You know, we always think about career progression needs to be up, but, you know, as you know, the organizations are a pyramid, right? But I think those sideways movements, and I don't think we talk about it enough, but sort of, again, measuring lots of things like that really, again, showcases that broadening experiences are really important. So I think it's two parts. Getting into organizations is certainly about having the right approaches to interviews, but then being inside, and I guess always the advice that I give is you got to try something. It is about as individuals putting ourselves out there. But I think the sideways movements, we don't really value those highly enough.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you.
The flip side of that is I was looking at some graphs which, you know, look at the way grants are being awarded to women in academia. And actually, a success rate is highest among the women in their 50s and 60s. So women in their 50s, 60s who lead the grants, their success rate is way higher than women in their 30s and 40s. So it's obviously something which happens, it changes from sector to sector as well. But yeah, thank you, Rachel. On that note, I'm going to actually close this particular panel, but not before thanking our wonderful panelists for taking the time to share their experience and be so open in their answers and also share their expertise with us. We're really grateful to have all of you on board today. We have one more panel as part of our 3-panel series, and that's upcoming on October the 11th. And it's actually focusing on a topic which a lot of you touched on today, which is around navigating a pathway in STEM. So it's focused more on girls and the family and their supporters in how to actually navigate the pathway into STEM and talk about STEM careers. So open for registrations now. It's on October the 11th. So head over to our website and you can see it over there. But on that note, thank you very much to each and every one of you, and also to the audience for staying with us. We'll have the recording available sometime soon, which you can also view. So thank you once again.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.